You are listening to the Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Crist. Join him as he and his guests discover how businesses thrive in California.
Well, welcome to the Pilgrim on the 405 in this time of staying at home. And it looks like we are flattening the curve. Hopefully, it looks good for us here in Southern California. But you know, Paul, you and I were talking about before we got started about what you're hearing about people who are learning how to use Zoom or any other video conferencing platform to communicate. Now, I know that there's a lot of people who have this thing down. They've been doing it for years. You and I have been doing it for at least 8 years.
A long time, yeah.
Communicating this way. And I've taught with, trained people all around the world with Zoom for at least 6 years. So, and a lot of people now are learning how to do it because it seemed like when we could be together that video conferencing was a kind of a, well, that's neat, but that's not anything.
It wasn't necessary. Yeah.
No, it's not necessary. And so now that we are at home, that most of us are at home, we need to talk about how do you go about doing this? What kind of equipment is good? But even if you get the equipment and we got a connection, what do we do on it? So tell me what you've been hearing.
That's the key. It's not, people are suddenly struggling how to use the platform, how to get on Zoom is the most popular one, or Cisco WebEx or Skype or one of those other platforms. As you said, we've been hosting remote radio shows and podcasts using these mediums for years. So we're comfortable doing this. We've got lights and cameras and mics and all that kind of stuff set up. And there's a variety of tricks and stuff we could talk about. But I think the key isn't so much how you do it, it's what you do with it. People don't know how to connect virtually. It's like a bad webinar. They spend the first 10 minutes, can you hear me? Tapping on the microphone, trying to adjust everything, and it's just a miserable experience. It takes so long for it to get up and running. If this is going to work, we wouldn't do that if you came into my office. I wouldn't spend 10 minutes saying, wait a minute, let me move the chair. No, let me go get this. Let me go get you some coffee. Wait a minute, I don't like the chair over here. Let's move you over here. It wouldn't be a productive meeting if we did it that way. So let's start with just the basics of once you get on. We can talk about how you get on if people still are struggling to do that. But what do you do to get the meeting up and running responsibly, productively?
Well, let's assume that you have the platform.
Right.
That you know how to use Zoom as the host. Let's assume this. Is that fair to assume?
Yeah,
that?
I think that's another show. If people really want to know about cameras and mics and things, there are lots of YouTube videos out there, and we could certainly do a show about that. But let's assume that you're on now, like we are. What do you do with this platform?
All right, so number one, I always ask people to start at least 7 minutes before.
Good.
Be there 7 minutes. Now, in EOS, we have a saying that came from a football coach that says, early is on time and on time is late.
Yes, right.
So what we do is I ask people who are in online meetings to be there 7 minutes ahead of time, which means that's the time that we fumble around about getting the lighting right, about making sure that that I know how to mute and unmute my microphone, all of those technical details.
Right.
7 minutes ahead of time.
And when you don't do that, let's assume that it's not just two people. Let's assume it's a big organization. There's 4, 5, 6, or 600 or 60 or whatever as we're trying to do this. That gets even more important the more people you add, because that late person stops everything. Unlike a late meeting, if I hold a meeting in my conference room and somebody comes in late, they can slip in, they can quietly try and catch up, but the meeting goes on. But we have to stop until everybody's ready in an online meeting.
Well, that's right. And so 7 minutes ahead of time means that you have time to work through all of that. If you don't do that 7 minutes ahead of time, you're going to be using 14 minutes to do it all after the time you said you would start.
And everybody's annoyed because I came, but Will didn't. Oh, my God, now we got to wait while Will figures us all out, and we're wasting time.
Right. So people should be scheduled to be there 7 minutes ahead of time, knowing we're going to start on the hour or in the 30 minutes, the half hour. All right, number two, you have to have an agenda. And
Amen to that.
publish agenda. You have to know what you're going to do, and you have to have some time next to that, and how we're going to use our 30 minutes or an hour or 90 minutes. And goodness, let's not plan for more than 90 minutes unless it's an all-day training session, which I've done many of,
Hmm.
and very successful. And it's not me; it's simply using a system.
So
And yes,
let me stop you for 1 minute there, because I think there's two potential uses for this. One, we're familiar with an online meeting. Everybody's around the world, everybody's around the country, everybody's now at home. So it's a way we can gather virtually and get something done. And I'm with you. You got to have an agenda, because too often they're like, okay, who wants to start, or what are we going to talk about? And they wander aimlessly around till they get to the point. People start giving you this look, on this kind of glassy-eyed look, like, why am I here and how do I get out of this? But there is an opportunity to do something that we've never tried with this medium, and that is to really connect with people, not just communicate with them. Thank you for coming. I'm going to share some information. You can ask some questions, and then we're going to go. To use it in a way that we've never really thought of it before, as a connecting tool, as a virtual gathering. People are doing online
well,
cocktail parties and
let me
birthday
stop you there,
parties.
Paul.
Yeah,
Let me stop you there for a minute, because part of that agenda is to spend time catching up with each other.
Mm.
And so what we do, even in face-to-face meetings with EOS, is we do a check-in, and we go around the circle. And in that time, we give one good thing that happened to us, that we did or that happened to us in the last week. And we do one, and we talk about one great thing that happened to us professionally or business-wise in the last week. Everybody has to participate in that. And you can also add the optional, what is your expectations for today's meeting? That's the beginning of the meeting. It's always the beginning, because that's the way we all get on the same page emotionally.
right.
We check in, and that's part of the agenda. It might take 5 minutes, it might take 10 minutes, but everybody, and that's where we initially go around checking with everybody in the meeting.
Well, I like that because it becomes participatory. Too many online meetings, like online webinars, are just classrooms. You sit and I talk, and I present something and I show slides, and at the end you can ask some questions, and then we all go away. It's an online classroom. We're familiar with that format. I don't know that that's the most productive use of this new medium. We're trying to figure out how to connect with people in a time and place when we're under stress, we're all alone, and we can't go to church and gather. We can't go to the bar and gather. We can't go to the sports stadium and gather. We can't go to our friend's house.
Well, yes, we can. Yes, we can. That's part of what I think we have the opportunity at this time to do. All those things, go to church, go to the bar, go to other friends, go to friends' houses. Those are things we could do before, and we learned how to do those. All right, I didn't grow up going to the bar, but I learned that that is a place that I could go if I wanted to.
Right.
And I especially learned it in Boston, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. I'll
used to
bet.
learn it. But we learned how to do that. And in this time of constraints, because we're at home, we have the opportunity, if we choose to use it, to learn how to do all of those things virtually.
Well, I think we're desperate to do it, because what I've seen already is three things. One, I'll give you three anecdotal things that kind of show what I'm seeing out there. I live in a suburban tract community, tract homes. I have a neighbor who's divorced, a guy who's a tech worker who works from home. Nice guy, rarely talk to him, rarely see him. He's just in his house. I sort of wave at him once in a while when I see him out and about. He saw me out this past weekend, and he made a point to come over and try and talk to me. We stayed 6 feet apart, but he had never done that in a long time. Why? I think he was lonely and he was scared. He wanted, somehow he felt he needed some sort of face-to-face contact with people. That's one example. Second example is when 9/11 hit, I did own a bar, and I went down to the bar that night just to see how things were going, and it was packed. nobody wanted to stay home. If everybody wanted to gather someplace, and that was one of the few places they could think of to go. And then I'm a good Irish Catholic, so a couple of days later, the church I go to had a special mass, and it was packed. And I went because somehow we just needed that connection. Like after a school shooting, when they have candlelight vigils and everybody comes out, we somehow want a communal experience. Can this be a communal experience?
Of course it can. Since you ran a bar, you can run Paul's bar. Because what that means, I've heard people, I've asked people, I've told people, it's interesting because I've heard that there are people who are doing Bible studies online.
Yeah, right.
And in talking about that, I'm amazed because there are people who say, oh, yes, I did too. And I didn't even know that they were ever in a Bible study.
Yeah,
but
right.
They're putting that together. And with Zoom, you can have up to 100 people on your conference. And if you plan it, you have an agenda for it, you have some time to get to know each other. And with Zoom, you can have breakout rooms where you can break out with 3 to 5, as many as you want in each group. They can spend some time, then you can bring them back together. You can learn how to do all of this. You could not only have a Bible study, you could have a time where the bar is open, we're having a happy hour, it's a BYOB.
Right.
But we are going to sit here and we are going to chew the fat together.
Right. I've heard now people doing online birthday parties because I can't come over to your house. I heard people doing online happy hours. One of them called it a quarantini. They were making quarantinis that day. They were pouring, have fun with it, do something silly with it. But try and make it a communal experience. Even though I can't touch you, I can still see you. And that's much more powerful than just hearing your voice.
Well, that's right. And it doesn't mean that we all have to be on at the same time. We can use the breakout rooms in Zoom to break into smaller groups. Just like in your bar, I'm sure that not everybody was listening to one person all the time.
No.
They were at small tables. They were sitting up at the bar with 2 or 3 people around them. You can use breakout rooms to have those kind of conversations. You can come back and have different people in each breakout room. You can change it up. But the point is it's not that we've figured it all out. The point is jump in the pool and start swimming.
Right.
Make connections. Learn about what the technology can do. Just think about Zoom for a moment. Zoom was doing fine. I think they had 20 million, 30 million different Zoom meetings a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then as it moved up to 200, 300, 400 million a day, then there were some bad actors who said, oh, let's see what we can do here. Can we break in and do a Zoom bomb? And
Right.
they did. All right, so what did Zoom do? They figured out how to stop that from happening.
Right.
We're learning all of that as we move forward. And the same thing is true when we are clear that our reason for being is 2 reasons. Number 1 is we're here to get a job done. Number 2, we're here to relate.
Yes, and connect. So I think that's been one of them, and nobody's talked about this much, but I think when the dust settles and the analysts look back on this time, I think you're going to see a lot of anxiety, mental issues, health issues coming up from this forced isolation. Because in every other crisis I can imagine, and it seems like we've gone through 2 or 3 of these once-in-a-lifetime things. I thought we were only going to get one in a lifetime. We've had 9/11, we've had the Great Recession, we've had the dot-com bust, and now we have the Great Pandemic. Each of those before, we could revert to our tribal, communal selves. We gathered together to comfort each other. We gathered together to celebrate. We gathered together to feel safe. Now we're being asked to deal with this alone, and I think that's what's frightening people.
Well, yes, but I just challenge that. We are given the opportunity to learn how to use technology to relate.
Yes, and that's what we've never done. We've done. I will use technology to communicate with you, to tell you something, maybe even to conduct a business meeting. But I'm not used to sitting on with, like my wife, her perfect example. She has a grown daughter from her first marriage who lives in Texas. They talk all the time. They text all the time. That's their preferred way of doing it. Suddenly now, she's lived there for years. Suddenly now they wanted to see each other face to face.
Yes,
And they
we're
suddenly,
learning,
yeah,
we're learning how you do that by just pushing a button.
right.
Just pushing a button. We got with our grandkids last Saturday, and it was new. They had to learn how to use Zoom. My daughter is the chief extradition officer for the state of New York. I mean, she knows Governor Cuomo very well. She worked with him when she was the liaison for the assembly. She hadn't ever used Zoom.
Isn't that amazing? Right. So she
But
wasn't some Luddite living in a cave somewhere here. Right.
no, and the now what can you do? You can have happy hours. You can do games. There are lots of very
Wow.
interesting, fun games.
Play a game. Play Monopoly online here.
Well, there's lots of even more exciting games than that. But you can even have games that you play, just board games that you play together. But my point is that there's a lot of things that we can do if we allow our imaginations to get beyond grieving for what we've lost.
Yes.
And
Right.
looking for the opportunities. I mean, that's the true innovation that comes out of this.
Well, and you talk about this so often on your show. You can whine about taxes, you can complain about regulations, or you can figure out how to do business in California because it's still the largest market and the most exciting opportunities. Say what you will about all the other problems of doing business here, the traffic included. There are more people here who are doing more innovative things. So if you want to swim in that lane, you want to play with that group of people, this is where you have to do, and somehow you have to figure out a way past those other problems. You can't just complain and bitch and moan about it all day. If you do, then leave. Then go somewhere else where the pace of life is slower, different, and cheaper, easier, all that stuff, and accept that there are going to be perhaps fewer opportunities or fewer things.
Think for a moment. When you are online, once you go online, you are global.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Right.
It's not like, we're going to get our little Bible study together with the same 10 people that we've had for the last 6 months or years, and we're going to do the same thing that we did. When you do that, it's possible for you to find somebody in Africa, in Germany, in Japan, in Australia, to be in your Bible study.
Yeah, we're not. I don't
Wouldn't
know
that
if we're
be
ready for that
amazing?
yet. I don't know if we've thought of that yet. We know it does it, but how? I can't think of any time that I formed a group outside of my own little physical community.
Well, here's our Rotary Club. By the way, last week, the Rotary Club in Southern California made 25,000 face
masks,
protectors.
right.
Not just the mask, the plastic.
Oh,
protector.
okay, right.
All right, but the president of our Rotary Club, Ross Minion, called up the other day and said, "Let's talk about how we move forward with our 7:30 in the morning breakfast club online for our Sunrise Rotary Club." And I said, "That's great. Once we get we can spend, do a 30-minute coffee hour, and make sure that everybody knows how to use Zoom, because it's primarily an older group. And then look at what we can do. We can pick up the phone beforehand, find another group that is meeting someplace in the world at our same time. Now, we're at 7:30 in the morning California time, but there are places in the world where Rotary clubs are meeting at the same time in the world, and we could put them together and have a joint meeting.
Interesting.
And we've done that before. We did it with Zoom, but we did it with projecting it, and so we really had a couple of people on the other side. But we could have an international Rotary Club meeting every week. We could bring in speakers that we would never be able to get before, and they could speak to our club. When we start imagining what we can do, we can get excited about it.
Well, let's talk about one other thing that you pointed out, and it's so obvious, but once you get past how to use the technology, then you're talking about what to do with the technology, and not just be on time and have an agenda and do this, but how to be innovative. and take advantage of the sharing opportunity. And you said something so obvious to me but it stuck with me because it was something I never thought about. When you and I meet physically, you're going to come over to the studio here. We're going to talk about your show. We're going to talk about something. You're likely to say, hey, I just saw a book. I just saw something. Let me send that to you. And maybe you go on your smartphone and send it to me right there, but maybe you have to wait till you go home. Now, because an idea pops in your head, we can share our screen. You can show.
Well,
So you were talking about a book. Yeah.
Let me show you the book that I found last night. It's called How to Improve Your Virtual Meetings by John Arthur. He must have written the book in the last 3 weeks because he talks about COVID-19.
Oh, he does? Wow.
Absolutely. And it's a very simple book.
Talk about jumping on an opportunity here. Yeah.
Oh, you get it. It's like, $3.99 on Kindle, or it's for free if you're on Kindle Unlimited. And just to go through some of the things that he's done, it's a very simple thing. He talks about why these meetings are more important now. He says that we got bandwidth that's ready for this to happen.
Yeah, right.
And that we have all of these freelancers and digital nomads that are out. They're a major part of the economy, and they're going to get bigger because as we learn, two things are happening right now, right? Think about them. I just talked to a woman in. I talked to her on Facebook Messenger.
Right.
She said she got laid off. She's in Toronto. She got laid off from Strategic Coach 2 days ago, and so she is now on her own, and she also has the ability to communicate, connect, and to work remotely.
Yeah.
And we're teaching people to do that. And then we're also laying some people off and telling them they aren't going to be coming back. So now they have to learn this, and now they have the opportunity to use what they have to make it possible. So we're going to have a huge shift in how business is being run and how people are working.
So let's bring you back to your video so we don't just leave the share screen up there here. And as you're doing that, I'm going to ask you an intriguing question on that point. So I read this the other day, another thought that we're going to spend the next year, in my opinion, talking about the new normal. This is such a disruptive event, economically, psychologically, every way, shape, or form, that it's going to take us a while to figure out how to process and what changes. And I think we're going to talk about this for a long time to come because I think things are going to change.
We're going to learn how to do church remotely.
We're going to learn how to do lots of things.
Doesn't mean that we'll never get back together,
right.
But we are going to be forced to learn how to connect and worship remotely.
How to commune together remotely when we're to not just talk to each other and not just see each other, but to somehow actually connect. Is going to take new skills that we have not developed yet. All right, so one of those things that came up that may happen is people may finally use this as an excuse to leave big cities. The only reason L.A., New York, and Chicago exist, like Silicon Valley exists, because there's a proximity. I can bump into other people. There's an opportunity there that doesn't exist if I'm in the middle of nowhere somewhere. I can't that happenstance. I see them at the grocery store. I see them at the coffee shop. They're my next door neighbor. Their opportunities are greater because we are jammed together. But in a world where pandemics are possible like this, maybe we'll want to diffuse. Maybe we'll want to spread out into hinterlands and the open lands, because now, if we felt there was still an opportunity, not just to do business, but to meet people online. Talk about that.
Well, think about this. I just got off of a town hall meeting for all the EOS implementers around the world this morning. And there had been planned, we do our regular quarterly meetings. We either fly to Detroit or we go to London or we go to Denver every quarter. We pick one of those. Well, that's now online.
Right.
And they are having to figure out how to do everything we did before online.
Right.
And they're going to also discover that there's even better things to do, different things that we couldn't do before. And secondly, we had a large conference that was limited to 1,000 people. It was for not only implementers but also for clients.
Hmm.
But only 1,000 people could go because that was the largest place they could find to make it work.
Right.
Well, guess what? Now it is available to
A
everybody.
million people could be hooked up online. Yeah.
It's going to be global, and we're all going to be on it. And they're learning how right now. They've got technology experts and meeting facilitation experts working on how to make this happen remotely.
You seem excited about this.
I am excited.
We're all mourning the lack of touch, the lack of
So,
human. We're
yes,
all
you can stay mourning as long as you want. You can stay grieving what we have lost.
yeah,
But
right.
we haven't lost it. It's simply displaced for a while. Everybody is reminding us things that we lost, we will find again. But because of what we're doing right now, if we can move beyond the grief and look for the opportunity that's ahead of us right now, then we will not only get back what we lost, but we will also have a whole additional set of skills and techniques and pathways to communicate. I think one of the largest ones is if you get online, you can find international, global conversations right now that people like you and I are having about the virus.
So let me
And
stop you on
that's
the.
not going to change. We're going to be more connected to people around the globe than we ever have been.
All right, let me be a contrarian here a bit. That's my specialty. What if it makes us even more prone to living in our own bubble? Now I've got a shotgun out at my door. Everybody stay away. Stay 6 feet away. I'm even more isolated. I'm not going to go hang out with people. I'm not going to work with people. I'm not going to talk to people. Only when necessary will I reach out. I'm living in a bunker mentality here. And I read an interesting piece that said part of the problem of social media, which was supposed to connect people in these virtual tribes and communities, everybody can come together that loves Irish music all over the world here, or whatever your crazy fascination is. Instead, it sifted us into these self-isolating bubbles where the only voices we hear are those just like us. And so we don't reach out past that, and that's what's made that fear of others. Oh, thank God I found the 5 other people think just like me, and the whole rest of the world's crazy, and we're going to block them out. And
Right? That's right. And that's always been the case. It comes out of fear.
right,
And fear always narrows us down. Fear is the beginning of war.
yeah, right,
All right, and it's whether individual war
conflict,
or
yeah,
global war, but that's fear. And always despots have played on fear. Now, when you look back historically and you look around today, what's the opposite of fear? It's love. Fear wants to exclude, and love wants to include.
yes,
When you,
right,
and right now, when you talk about you began the conversation saying, "Oh, we are missing this connection,
right.
this relationship." That to me is we are missing the ability to love at a small level or a medium level or at a large level. But it is love, that desire to attract, to move forward, to move toward, to share with others. Now, that the world has always been filled with having people who are afraid and they exclude others, and those who are confident and willing to move forward because of the desire to love, to include other people.
So can I
But what
love
I'm
you
saying,
from afar? Can I love you? I know people do online dating and fall in love all over the world. That just seems
we're
so
not
bizarre
talking,
to me.
we're talking about having compassion for
Yes,
people
right,
in Australia who are dying from the disease.
right.
Right?
And see them as one of us and not something else. Somebody said something really. Here's an ugly thought, but I'll exercise and let it out here a little bit. There's been some little burbles and bubbles around in little circles saying, maybe we should just get this over with, and maybe it's depending on your point of view, maybe it just cleans out the herd here. It's okay if those people die in New York because there's too many of them, or it's okay if those people die in the South because I didn't like them, or it's okay if those people die in poor areas because there's too many of them. And people sort of view this as natural selection, and maybe it's okay until I don't want my tribe dying, not my family, not me, not anybody I know. It's okay if somebody dies in Australia, but not here.
It's not any different from what that saying about what happened in Germany. When they came after the Jews, I said it's not me.
Yeah.
When they came after the intellectuals, I said it's not me. When they came after the homosexuals, I said it's not me. When they came after you, I was concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's what we have the opportunity to do. And of course, I can tell you, I know people very close to me who are that kind of conspiratorial mindset, and they want to separate and they want to think through everything, and it's always them doing something to me. Therefore, we got to protect ourselves from them.
Right.
On the other hand, I know plenty of people who are saying, how do we continue to connect? How do we find new ways of relating to people, given the constraints that we have right now?
And that was supposed to be the power and the promise of the internet from the beginning. It was a way to reach beyond our physical limitation. I remember my aunt and grandmother talking about the world they grew up in, and they lived in a neighborhood in Minneapolis, was 5 blocks by 5 blocks. Nobody had cars. They didn't have trolleys were a luxury. The whole world, everybody they knew lived within a 5-block radius, or you lived in a small town, and that's just, you never went beyond the boundaries of a small town. Then we created highways and cars, and we spread all over the country here, and planes and mass transportation and other things, and suddenly we're moving all over the world and everything. And yet somehow we still think so tiny. We still revert to our bunker, our friends, our social community, and rather than using the internet as a tool to expand our view and talk to people around the world, we use it to find those few other angry people and connect with them.
Well, but again, that's not any different from what happened when books came out.
Books. Oh yes.
All of the technology we have always has.
We're gonna let people read. Oh my goodness.
That's right. When the Bible was printed, we can't let the church said we can't let everybody read the Bible.
No,
they won't understand it.
That's right.
You
got to come through us. We interpret it for you. Yeah.
Yes. Right. But my point is that this technology there's nothing changed in this technology from 8 years ago. Zoom was there.
Right.
I mean, Skype was there. We've had all this technology. And my point is that now, because of the constraints, we are having a lot more people who know how to do it and are online. I mean, it's 400 million Zoom meetings a day.
Unbelievable.
Enormous.
Unbelievable. So here's the final question as we get to our last 5 minutes here. I'm a big history buff. I was a history major, and go look it up if you've never heard of it, but 99% of Americans have never heard of the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. Killed 60 million.
Well, you know why it became the Spanish flu, right?
Because they talked, the Spanish king or something got it, and it didn't start in Spain. But
started someplace else. They blamed it on the French, and the French said, "Not us. Oh, yeah. We didn't do this." So they blamed it on the Spanish.
And I also read this is right during World War I, so a lot of the governments were trying to suppress it, that we're losing enough people, and Spain was not at war, so they didn't have that same sort of censorship in place, and they talked about it more often.
Yeah.
So out of this thing, and I think the number was something like 20 million people died, or 30 million people, nobody knows exactly, around the world. 20 million people. Many as in World War I itself, maybe. And there were 600,000 deaths here in the United States. And yet when it was over, it was the forgotten thing. Everybody immediately said, I'm never going to think of that again. Whew, we're through it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to plan for it. I'm going to pretend like it never happened. And my grandparents never talked about it. History book, I studied history a million times. It was a blip if it was even mentioned in there.
No, let me share with you from the conversations that I've had with the native elders in Alaska.
There you go.
In native villages. because back in 1918,
Because you
what
go up there,
happened-
you go up there once a year, and you
Yes,
bring
yes,
church to these people in communion and
yes,
whatnot. And
yep, yep. So, so in the process of being up there for the past 13 years and talking to native elders, what happened was when the flu came in, it took out entire villages.
oh, especially in native populations that had no resistance to any of this.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so major portions of the culture, leaders, all of that were dead in 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow.
In some villages, they just came in and dug trenches and buried everything
Wow.
because they had no idea what was going on. And because of that trauma, that utter trauma, then the survivors said, "We're not talking about that." And even today, it's referred to as the time we don't talk about. And that trauma is still working its way through the native population.
Right. So will we similarly respond to this trauma by sticking our heads in the sand and say, phew, we survived, don't ever talk about it, don't ever think about it? Or will we use this as this adaptive response that humans have to survive and to thrive even in difficult times, and embrace this new technology and make it part of our day-to-day activities more than we ever have?
I don't think it's embraced the new technology because the technology's been here.
Yeah,
This is-
embrace
this-
what has been there that we didn't pay
it's
much attention
learn
to.
how to use the technology for positive connection and relationship, and to use the possibilities that are there, because we now have the ability to pick up the phone and call anybody in the world. And as Peter Diamandis says, the rest of the world is coming online even as we speak.
Yeah.
And we have the opportunity to get beyond our limited world. Now, obviously, there's a difference of opinion. Should we go back to where America was the only power and we had you had ideological walls, or are we going to be part of the global community and share in the responsibility and the possibilities? And that's an ideological question that we're going to work our way through.
I hope that one of the things that happens of this, I'm a talker by nature. I'm Irish by nature. Talking comes second nature to me. I grew up in a world where everybody talked and told stories and laughed, and we had extended conversations. I went to Ireland, and I said that's part of the culture there. It always has been. Yet in America, we have shrunk the conversation down so much. We're suddenly fascinated with storytelling again because we've forgotten how to do it. We want it in snippets, sound bites, tweets. We don't relish spending an hour, as you and I have just done here, hashing through something and thinking about it here, or sitting at the bar like we used to and just going on and on about whatever.
Paul, I know that in your studio there you have some bottles.
A few, one or two.
and I have here my coffee cup. So maybe we should finish this by sharing whether it's in a bar or a Starbucks coffee shop, but sharing what we normally do.
There you go.
To simply share.
I'm a collector of Irish whiskeys here,
There we
so
go.
Slange, which simply means, cheers, and it's the whole notion of embracing. That's how you get to know people. That long-form storytelling that tribes have always done that we in modern society have lost. I hope we don't. I hope we tell this story for generations to come of how we made it through.
The way we're going to do it is to do it.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's not will it happen or what's in the way of it. It's simply doing it.
Yes.
And that's what I appreciate about EOS, that we have not missed a beat. Not any one of my clients has mentioned anything about not continuing with the ongoing full day sessions every quarter. They said, how do we do it?
Right.
And all of my EOS support teams have helped us to learn how to do it, and we're doing it. I've had 5 different sessions all day long, and every one of them people were delighted and really supported by being able to move forward because of that session. And it was all done online.
And because we know that, unlike other crises, perhaps a war, we know there is an end to this. It may not end tomorrow. It may not end for a while. It may come back in waves or that we can't anticipate yet. And yet, this isn't a forever extinction event here. This isn't an asteroid hitting the Earth and wiping out all life on the planet here. We can and will survive and make it through it. And there will be people who don't. There will be people who stumble and fall or die along the way. Horrible, awful. But admitting that we move forward as a group of people, those who remain, and the many will survive and thrive in ways we haven't even anticipated.
Well, at the same time, we're not going to eliminate the coronavirus.
No.
What we're going to do is we're going to learn how to live with it.
Yes, that's a good point.
We're going
Right.
to protect ourselves. All of this rush was the same thing as the war. Nobody ever thought we're going to eliminate Germany and Hitler in a day or two.
No.
It was, how do we learn to come into relationship with what we have to do to thrive in that, to survive and then thrive. It's the same thing here. Coronavirus is going to be here along with us. It's on the globe.
Right.
We don't have any way to eliminate it in the same way that we didn't have any way to eliminate smallpox. It's still there in vials around, right?
Right.
We have learned how to come into a relationship.
To contain it, to limit it, and to adapt to it, to protect ourselves against it.
With it.
Right.
And I think that's the same thing right now, is we're learning how to live with these constraints. And frankly, I think these constraints are going to be very valuable to us in terms of learning how to live in a global construct.
Yes, and to be more aware of personal hygiene and touching and cleaning and all those kinds of things. All that's going to not disappear, at least for a while. I'll tell you an interesting thing you bring up as we just go on a couple more minutes here, is that after World War II, my parents' generation, your parents' generation, the devastation they saw first with the Depression, and then the greatest war the world has ever seen. 50 million or more people were killed. After 20 million had been killed by the flu, and 20 million had been killed by World War I, and other people were killed along the way. In a very short period of time, 100 million people or more left the planet. Were gone. And the economic collapse, and then the political collapse, and the suffering and dying that came out of that, we established things like Social Security. We established things like banking controls. We can respond. We're reacting in ways already that Herbert Hoover couldn't imagine in 1929 when the stock market crashed. Or the federal government wasn't seen as an agency to step in and inject money and pay for things. We've already created physical mechanisms to help us deal with future crises like this one. I'm assuming we're going to do the same out of this pandemic.
Well, you think about Andrew Yang's one issue. Right?
Yeah, and everybody laughed hysterically. Are you going to send everybody $1,000? What planet are you on? And now we're all going to get a check in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
How fast can we get it out back to them?
Right.
And how long? How many months are we going to have to do it?
Yeah, right. We're going to do it once, or we're going to do it for 3 months, or we're going to do it for 6 months. It is amazing.
Think about the difference. Before it was, we're going to give it to people who are struggling and really not doing their share. Somehow they haven't really connected with the mainstream economy.
Yeah, they're just not
Now
trying.
We're doing it because this is the way to keep the economy strong.
Yeah, in Denmark they actually tried. In Denmark, in Denmark, they actually, I'm told that they actually, rather than just send money to people, sent money to companies that said, "Send us your payroll. We will make payroll for you."
But think about that. When we've connected this sharing money with people to keep the economy strong, we've gone a whole different direction.
Yeah, right. Henry Ford
This is
didn't.
not just welfare. This is how we deal with these huge disparities in wealth.
Henry Ford didn't just give his workers $5 a day, which was a shocking amount of people to attract workers. He did it so they could buy his cars.
Yes. Very strange. Very different. Very different. Hey, Paul, this has been wonderful.
I enjoy it. I look forward to more of
there's
these.
other people out there who enjoy it, but I've enjoyed it.
I have too, because it's given us a chance to talk in a way we haven't in a long time and to connect with other people who are all trying to figure out how we're going to get through this together. By talking it through, we'll get through it.
Oh, we're going to be fine. We are going to be fine.
From your lips to God's ears here. Right?
Take care.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Pilgrim on the 405 with Will Crist.